Peace and welcome to the culture right here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in this afternoon. Folks, we got a lot to talk about. We're inching closer to the national midterm elections, and we check in with our political analyst, Hassan, Mr. Politics Giordano, as we talk about what President Biden spoke about yesterday in terms of protecting democracy. We also want to talk about this thing around Justice Clarence Thomas and how the Trump administration and his team and his close associates thought that Justice Clarence Thomas would be the key to overturning the 2020 election. More details about that situation is coming out. Plus, we'll check in with Hassan to get his key picks in the big races that are happening across the country. We'll have that. Then we check in with Ashley Banks to talk to us about voter suppression and unfounded claims and how this continues to be a real problem for Black voters. We'll talk about that. I got another update for you about Brittney Griner and so much more. So stay with us. It's all happening on today's edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Folks, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in. Big shout out to my culture crew, always doing it real big. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you're not a part of the crew, just join us in the chat as we're streaming live right now on YouTube and on Facebook. And certainly you can check us out on our website at blackstarnetwork.com. Folks, we got a lot to get to, so let's waste no time and let's jump right into it. Today, my culture crew member is my guy, my brother, my man. He's a hip hop artist. He's an activist. He's an advocate, always doing something good for the community. My brother, Mr. Jules P. Jules, what's going on, bro? How are you, sir?
What's going on, bro?
Good, good. I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well. Let's get this show going. Let's go.
Let's go. Let's go. All right, let's check in with Mr. Politics himself, Hassan Giordano, who is the owner of DMV Daily Media Group. He's talking to us, and he's always been keeping us on top of things in terms of what's happening politically around the country. My man Hassan, my fellow Raven fan, what's happening?
Well, you see who the Ravens got, right? Before free agency, right? Out of Chicago, right? Yeah, we're going to the Super Bowl, baby. Don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted. That's the Ray Lewis in the 21st century, nigga. Come on, man. We can talk politics, but you know I got to talk about them Ravens before we get started.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Hey, look, Hassan, this is going to be your last time on the show. Well, you know what? I might bring you on Tuesday. Just keep your schedule open, bro. Because on election night, if you're not busy, we certainly want to bring you on. But you know, I think your insight is going to be important as we look at some of the big stuff that is happening around the country. First and foremost, let's talk about President Biden and what he had to say yesterday as he did a primetime speech, folks, for around the concern that he has about protecting democracy. Now, a couple of things have happened which has prompted the president to move forward and doing this primetime address. One is, of course, the attack on Paul Pelosi, the husband of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. That attack right there has sent shockwaves throughout Washington about the safety, security, and how there are essentially no boundaries and how far people may go in expressing some level of political violence. That's the one thing. The second thing is what we've been seeing and certainly talking about here and other places, voter intimidation at the polls. There are a number of states that are ramping up security measures to make sure that voters stay safe when they go to the polls, either during the early voting period or on election day on November the 8th. In states like Arizona, where we talked a little bit about it yesterday, Clean Elections USA, a group that is a far right-wing group, strong supporters of former President Donald Trump, the judgment came down from the courts there in Arizona for them not to film, not to take pictures, nor stand near voting locations, or 250, at least they have to be 250 yards away from voting locations. And even though in Arizona, some of these folks go as far as to carry weapons and to intimidate folks. So those things were the two big pieces I think that we saw yesterday, Hassan. But overall, do you feel like the president got the message across? Do you feel like this was the right message at the right time to kind of get the country ready for this unprecedented midterm election?
Well, I think he was really preaching to the choir, right? Many on the left realized that we have a problem from mostly those on the far right who believe and perpetuate this big lie theory, right? And they've seen the level of violence they're willing to go to. Look, just up in New Hampshire, when they were doing a Senate debate just the other night, the Republican former retired Army general was assaulted by a libertarian supporter right outside of the debate as he was heading in. So this level of violence that we're starting to see across the country, we've seen, frankly, for the past few years following the Trump administration, is starting to rear its ugly head. And so those on the left kind of knew it. Those on the right just don't care what Biden has to say, or that they're not going to caution themselves to not take this violence, to not be at polling locations, kind of being as a threatening figure. Now, you can come in the hood with that crap if you want to, and I don't think that's ever going to happen because they'll be run right out of there. But in localities and counties and suburbs across this country, you're going to start to see more threatening figures at the polls. And, you know, this level of what we saw following the Trump defeat is starting to boil over even across the world. Look at Brazil right now, what's going on down there, where Tropical Trump and his supporters will not concede the election that he lost to Lula da Silva. And so now you're starting to see roads closed, and we may see that happening right down there in Brazil. So I don't think that following the midterms next week will be as severe as we saw January 6th. But I do think that you're naive if you think that we're not going to see things happen especially in swing states like Arizona, like Pennsylvania, like Georgia, and some of these more southern states as well.
I want to share with folks just a report that came out from the New York Times about President Biden's remark. Take a look at this one. Let's put quote one on the screen, Keenan and Ariel. Thank you. First one was when it was reported, while candidates and voters have focused on economic and other issues, Mr. Biden sought to use a nationally televised evening speech to put the future of the nation's system of elections front and clear for the final days of debate before midterm elections on Tuesday that will determine control of Congress and numerous state offices. This is what President Biden said yesterday. He said, as I stand here today, there are candidates running for every level of office in America, for governor, candidate, Congress, attorney general, secretary of state, who won't commit. They will not commit to accepting the results of the elections that they're running in. Mr. Biden said at Union Station, just blocks from where a mob stormed the Capitol on January the 6th. This is the path to chaos in America. It's unprecedented, it's unlawful, and it's un-American. With that level of condemnation, Hassan, and then Jules, I want to get your take on it as well, bro. With that level of condemnation, you said he's speaking to his base, but I mean, we've had all of these hearings from the January 6th committee. There are all of this new information, the level of conspiracy and the level that Trump went and his people went to try to get this thing overturned and all of that stuff. People still, you don't think that the president is swinging some people closer to him than away from him? Because it's becoming like, if you say, oh, okay, January 6th, people still, I would think people are like, you know what, that was a crazy situation. Trump was behind it. And at the end of the day, how can you run an election if you don't even believe in the process? Like, I'm confused as to why people would still have that train of thought. Well,
it's the same people who thought that Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act were two separate things, right? So some of these people ain't the sharpest knives in the drawer. But to say that, I don't. President Biden, I think, was speaking more to urging people to get. I don't think he's trying to swing people, especially in the case with January 6th. Many of the people are in this country, especially these days, are locked into their beliefs, right? Whether it's be the far right, the far left, or right down the middle, and more moderate independents. You're not going. I don't think they're going to swing, especially with issues that have already been transpired and been hashed out over and over and over again, including January 6th, including the election, even to some degree, some of the other things that happened during the election. But I think he was more aiming towards, let's make sure these people don't forget about this stuff. Get out the vote, that your vote counts, that if you want to make sure these things don't happen in the future, don't just sit home. Because what you have is you have a lot of people across the country in safer seats, like Maryland, for instance. We have a open gubernatorial election. Westmore is the Democratic candidate, and we have a right-wing Trump supporting candidate in the terms of the Republican candidate. Now, most people think that Westmore, because of the polling, shows he has a 30 or 40 point lead. So most say, oh, you know what? He doesn't really need my vote, even though I would vote for him, but he's good, so I'm not going to show up to vote, right? And that's a lot of mindsets across the country where people feel like, well, you know, my vote really isn't going to count in this particular election, so I'm going to sit home. And I think that's what President Biden was trying to counter, to say, hey, it's more than just the candidate. Make sure you realize that there are people who are really trying to suppress your vote, who are really trying to take us back to the days where, President Trump making America great, what they thought America was great, right? And so make sure that you do not take this election for granted.
Absolutely. Jules, what's your take on this? Then we go to our online culture crew.
So, I'm definitely in agreement. It's funny to hear that, now President Biden is now the one, doing the speaking out about this voter suppression and things of that nature and the big lie. Well, as I mentioned on the show before, I always follow guys like Killer Mike. And it's like, voter suppression has been real for African-American and, urban culture communities. So it's like those type of things now being, forefronted by our president, it's like now is there a message that you're trying to get across as a part of what's already being stated and what we're already going towards, or are you actually using this as your platform or your agenda to, one, push your people to get into the office, and two, to keep your reign and your midterm voter polls as high as they can be. So it's just one of those things where it's like you're looking at it and it's like, okay, I get it, I understand it, but at the same sense it's like we've been dealing with the voter suppression, we've been fighting against it, and it's like now it's like we're not just sitting here laying on our butts not going out and voting, we're still at these polls voting, but it's like now you're bringing that awareness, thus hence, and we're trying to also prevent another January 6th, because at the same sense people are now openly freely more violent. So it's just like it's like now you're the thing is to deter this type of violence away from these polling situations, and people trying to speak out and run for office and having these debates and speeches. You don't want to have that stuff going on. But like January 6th is a prime example of, we're not going to get out of position. We're going to do what we want to do. We're going to continue to cause ruckus and wreck. And if you vote us out, or if you're trying to go against what we're saying, we will harm you. Just showing like that's the world we're living in right now currently.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's go to some folks from the culture crew. Lenora checked in, kicking it off for us this afternoon. Lenora, you said same old kumbaya speech, needs to be more fire. Hassan, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Look, he left out things like abortion, right? Things that are going to motivate voters to the polls. Women, I don't care what party you're a part of, believe in this sacred right of abortion. These are issues that he could have really targeted, went after. But again, this is Joe Biden. I would have rather him had Kamala come out there and try to, ramp him up. She's running around the country right now trying to, ramp up voters. But yeah, this was a very bland kumbaya. Hey, by the way, there's an election coming up. It was not any motivating factor whatsoever, in my opinion, and it could have been done a lot better.
Hey, Hassan, it's funny because there was an article that came out, New York Times put it out just a couple of days ago, saying that Democrats, and we talked a little bit about it, but I'm interested in getting your take, that Democrats, there are some top level, high officiating, high Democrats who are very concerned that the messages that and the issues that the Democrats are putting out to the general public aren't the right messages, aren't the right issues. You brought up abortion. The we can assume student loan debt is a big issue for some of us, but for young people, that's not necessarily their thing. They're looking at other stuff. What is the messaging that would activate Democratic voters and voters in general to lean to the Democratic agenda? What is that message? What are the top issues that you see that would get people going?
Well, I think, in part, sometimes it differentiates just depending on the state and the region you are. But from the presidential standpoint, from a national standpoint, they got to start talking about the economy. They're already weak on the economy as it is. So you have to reverse that. You have to reverse the perception that you are weak on the economy. Abortion rights, that gun rights and things that we saw coming out of the Supreme Court recently, those have been hashed out. But what I would do is take a look at what's coming up in terms of racial segregation and what we're seeing with the colleges and universities that are before the courts right now. The stuff that was said in some of these opinions that came out of the courts, including Clarence Thomas basically saying that, some of these things are just a precursor to what you're going to see come out of this court. And these are issues that you can really motivate people, saying, hey, if you like the fact that interracial marriage is accepted in America today, if you don't want to turn back that hand to time, make sure you get out the vote, because this Supreme Court, followed by a Republican-controlled legislature, will ensure that that never happens. You have to appeal to people's interests. And so even Val Demings down in Florida, the congresswoman, has said herself that Democrats do not have a great communications appeal. That's why she's trailing terribly in the polls to Senator Marco Rubio, who in the beginning of the race, people felt that though she could knock off the longtime senator, but as the race went on, as she got no real help from the National Party, and as the party's message failed to really attract voters to her side, she's far behind in the polls. And so you're starting to see these high-profile Democrats, as you said, start to come out and have a real disdain.
Oh yeah, the big one. Obviously, the big one is President Obama.
Oh yeah,
they got him running. They got him running around the country like he running for office again. You know what I'm saying? Like he doing more. He doing more than I think than President Biden. And people have criticized that. Like you bringing out the guy. Like your pinch hitter, right? You're bringing out your star player because you and some Republicans I've seen to say that they're like, oh, you don't have enough juice, so you got to rely on Obama again.
I would have brought him out from day one. That's your MVP. That's your cleanup hitter. Him and Michelle, I would have, man, if they could have, and I'm sure they probably tried, and they were like, hell no. Like, we did
right.
But I would have had both of them crisscrossing the country from day one, talking about policies under the Obama administration that helped people, right? Talking about a land and a time and era before Trump, right? And really motivating people, because these are individuals who can motivate. He has that type of style of speech. Joe Biden just doesn't. I'm sorry, he doesn't. Kamala really doesn't, if you want to be honest about it. There's only certain people. Kwesi and Fume, motivating speaker. I've had him crisscrossing the country. Once Wes Moore gets elected, that's a Democrat that you can get to motivate people across the country. Not only based off of their own stories, but how they can motivate other people that look like them, and even those who don't, to actually know that voting is serious. And Kwesi and Fume won his first race for city council by 3 votes. That is a motivating, compelling story. I would not be who I am today had it not been for those 3 people in Baltimore City in 1978 that helped propel me to political office. These are stories that aren't being told by the Democratic Party. Republicans, though, are very laser focused on their messaging at all times. And that's why they continuously make it look like the Democrats are just sad, really, to be quite honest.
Wow. Hey, Jules, one thing, and I want to get this comment in, Jules, and then get your response, then we'll take a quick pause. But Jules, one thing Bradley Guthrie checked in, he said, like, you need someone to motivate you to vote, like you either already checked out mentally from this stuff or you're just ignorant. What do you say to that, Jules? As a young brother, young voter, do we need somebody to motivate us? Do we need to hear from the president, the vice president, from the first Black president that we need to vote?
So in a situation like that, I think that the motivation kind of has to come with what pertains to you particularly. And I remember stating this in a conversation I had before. Sometimes it's not candidate, it's the issues. What are they talking about? So sometimes you got to look past what a Joe Biden or what a higher ranking officer or elected official, what their title is, and actually look at the issues. And that's your motivation, because you got to look at things that relate to you. Me personally, I don't have things that relate to a lot of the other left side of the political party. So it's like the things that I need to listen to, the things that motivate me is kind of sort of, okay, yes, the Democratic Party is saying A, B, and C, but also still got to hold them accountable because they're also not addressing D, E, and F. So it's just like, it's what motivates you that's being said and what topics can you focus on. The ignorance is when you don't look at the stuff on your own to research. That's the ignorance. The ignorance is speaking out and saying, oh, they don't do that for me, I'm not voting. That's the ignorance. The ignorance is not doing your job to research the topics or the candidates. So you got to do your just due to research what you want to focus on. And you don't have to vote every single thing. Like there's a ballot, you get a ballot that has 45 million different things. You got to bubble in this and that. If you don't know something fully to the fullest extent that you haven't researched when you got your pre-ballot, then don't vote for it, because now you're just making a decision out of nowhere with ignorance, and you don't know if you're voting for the right thing or trying to approve this ordinance or try to get this budget money for something that doesn't even affect you. So you got to do your personal research when you get those mail-in ballots before you even get to the actual election, and see what actually makes sense to you, what is affecting you and your family, and then make a decision based off of that.
Absolutely. Folks, go ahead, Hassan.
I want that clip. That clip right there, you can just clip that with exactly what he said and put that in messaging across high schools, colleges, and so forth across the country. That right there is a catalyst on exactly what it means to be ignorant, but also to know the process and be a part of the process.
Absolutely, bro. Absolutely. Great point. Look, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, folks, we're going to continue to get your take on this as we continue politicking with Mr. Politics, Hassan Giordano, got my culture crew member, Jules P., and certainly got you tuned in. Let's continue the conversation. Let me also just throw some more stuff in the waters here, folks. Let's talk about, as we're talking about what President Biden put out, how more details about the great conspiracy leading up to January the 6th continues to be revealed. Details are showing that there were a number of people that were involved in this conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election. The next person, Justice Clarence Thomas, can't believe that the Trump administration and his people thought that the justice would be key to their success in overturning the election in some parts of the country. So why is this man still sitting on the bench? We'll have that conversation. Also, we got to get Mr. Politics key picks for the upcoming, some of the big races around the country. And I want to hear from you as well about what races you are looking at. So stay tuned. That conversation and a whole lot more is coming up in the next 30 of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
An angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol. We've seen shots.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are black beyond measure.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Folks, welcome back to the show. We have been talking politics with Mr. Politics Hassan Giordano as he continues to talk to us about some of the big moments in yesterday's speech from President Biden, as President Biden talked about protecting democracy, voter intimidation, and so much more. Also joining us in the conversation has been Jules P., as our culture crew member for the day, as he continues to talk about why it's important for us to stay focused on the issues and understanding what's really at stake. And folks, we can't say it enough from this vantage point, from this platform. Your vote matters. Your vote matters, and it is serious. And as nothing else that you get, these local races and these statewide races, oh my gosh, as you heard Hassan say, you know, one of our famed black political officials, brother Congressman Kwesi Mfume, won his first race with just 3 votes, a 3-vote lead. Your vote matters. Let's look at some more of this situation here, Hassan, because people have and Jules, because people have been checking in about this whole Biden situation and how some are saying the president was soft, and some people say that, you know what, he did hit the right tone. Conscious Thought said, I want everyone to notice the relative silence from Republicans, conservatives, evangelicals, and many segments of the media regarding the seriousness of the threats to voting and its intimidation. Hassan, are you seeing the same thing, that same level of silence?
From Republicans the right way? Yeah, absolutely. They're a part of that, right? And you know, how can you chastise yourself? That it's not like these are false reports. And if they were, you would see them jumping up and down to say that these are false reports. I think it's the more interesting conversation is the conversation being had around Speaker Pelosi's husband and the attack on her husband, unfortunately, over in San Francisco, and who that individual may have been representing, right? Because obviously the Democrats and the left wing are saying this is the result of right-wing Trumpism, and that this was clearly a big lie individual theorist who was coming to attack her husband, while in the same breath, Republicans are saying, oh no, you know, this was a leftist hippie that he knew, and a lot of conspiracy theories about who her husband is. And so all of this is taking place, you know, days before the election. It's unfortunate, the assault, and I'm still trying to figure out how Capitol Police missed this, because Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House. And,
right.
And by the way, she's from Baltimore. Her family
right.
is from Baltimore. Her father was the mayor of Baltimore. Her brother was the mayor of Baltimore. And Nancy Pelosi, if she was in there, probably would have punched the attacker in the mouth. Nancy ain't no punk, but she is the Speaker. And she has Capitol Police protection at all times, including her house. So I was trying to figure out how somebody got into the house to do this without any Capitol Police intervention. Still shocking to me. And I think now reports are starting to come out about that. But yeah, Republicans can't really say anything about this level, because this is something that they're enjoying, that they're perpetuating, and that they have no problems with whatsoever.
And to some extent, Jules, something that they are benefiting from when they're using this in some way, shape, or form to talk about why that they're using this, like creating this narrative and say, see, the people don't want them in leadership, so neither should you, you know what I mean, type of thing. Not putting this in its proper context, that this is a guy, David Papp, 42 years old, who filled his head up with lies and conspiracy theories and essentially moved out on them, risking, you know, he could have been shot and killed by police, even though he attacked the speaker's husband. You know, I mean, this is an outgrowth of a real problem in this country, bro.
Right. So, and now we're getting to the actual point of the argument or the point of conversation. So the fact that it's comfortable enough to go to the Speaker of the House and attack her husband shows where we're at in this country. Like that shows that literally shows you where we're at in this country. I mean, again, so let alone, you know, a young white punk going to a grocery store in Buffalo shooting every African-American person in that grocery store. You know, that's issues that we've been dealing with for years, for centuries, for decades. That's the stuff that we've been dealing with. But now you even get to a point where now, after January 6th happens, which is, you know, still something that's still going on as an ongoing thing because of all investigations, everything's still being handed down. And in the aftermath that we're still dealing with till this day. But now you're attacking the actual house of the speaker. I mean, the House Speaker's house, and attacking and beating up her husband. It's just like, that shows you the state of where the country is at. That's why I always say, it's like, no longer are we paying attention to the actual issues. It's now, I feel like this world is like, I feel like we're living in a social media realm where if I see it, I can do it, instead of, hey, this isn't right. There's no more right and wrong no more. It's just like, hey, I think I can do something right now. Or I think I can do this. I can make this happen. There's no sense of logic going on in people's heads.
Absolutely.
Not our common sense heads, but I'm talking about these idiots out here doing this nonsense. It's just like we're living in a wild, wild west at this point. And it's like, okay, nobody's safe. So whatever your decision is, whatever your political party is, whatever your affiliation is, whatever you vote on, it doesn't matter, because somebody is going to oppose what you speak on, what you stand for, and is going to want to hurt and harm you. And they think they can do it and get away with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of Wild Wild West, let me just tell you how crazy this story is with this latest development around how January 6th and the attempts to overturn the 2020 election. The details are coming out. Hassan, you've been prophesizing that this was going to happen. That this thing is so far-reaching, bro, that we really didn't know how deep and how far and vast the situation was when we're talking about January 6th. Here's the latest about this, folks. The latest is that there were folks around Trump who was trying to get the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas to be in cahoots with them to push the big lie in order to overturn the election in some states. Here's what's reported. Check this out. There was an email from December the 31st of 2020, shows the lawyers discussing ways to delay the certification of results in Georgia, a closely contested state won by Democrat Joe Biden. One lawyer, Kenneth Chesbrough, suggested that an appeal to Thomas as the justice who handles emergency appeals from Georgia could end up being the key here. He said, we want to frame things so that Thomas could be the one to issue some sort of stay or other circuit justice opinion saying Georgia is in legitimate doubt. Realistically, our only chance to get a favorable judicial opinion by January 6th, which might hold up the Georgia count in Congress, is from Thomas. Another lawyer, John Eastman, responded that he was in agreement, saying that if Thomas were to act, that may be enough to kick the Georgia legislature into gear, because I've been getting a lot of calls from them indicating they're leaning that way. What? There's Justice Clarence Thomas, folks, whose wife, Jenny Thomas, who was, she recently testified for the January 6th committee. She's already on record saying that she was in some sort of communication with Mark Meadows, the chief of staff for former President Trump, and trying to create some sort of plan as a result of overturning the election. Hassan.
Mm-hmm. Well, bro, here's where we talked about this months ago, right? Here's why I want people to connect the dots. You have individuals who understand the process, right? And who understand how to circumvent that process. John Eastman was a clerk for none other than Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. So that's where the connection comes in. These individuals understand, which most people don't, how the Supreme Court works, where emergency hearings come up, depending on the circuit. And the circuits are the different appeal circuits across the country. So understanding that Clarence Thomas was in charge of emergency appeals. We just saw one from the Trump administration, his lawyers, about trying to prevent his taxes going to the United States House, right?
Right.
They understand how to work the legal system. So these lawyers, one of them having clerked for Justice Thomas in the past, who clearly knows Virginia Jenny Thomas, as well as the Supreme Court Justice, understanding that they knew that if they filed this emergency appeal, that he would be the one who's assigned to push this forward to the entire body of the Supreme Court, because it's only one justice who takes up different appeals, and then they decide, then it goes on, and then four of the justices have to sign on to it for it to be heard. But within this situation, he would have been the one signing off on it. And they figured, because remember, Eastman put on his blog in the beginning of December that he got a message from Jenny Thomas asking about them as quote unquote patriots, what the process was that they were doing to overturn the elections that had just occurred, right? And he posted this, oh my God, I just got a message from the wife of the Supreme Court Justice, and he put this all on his blog. And this helped perpetuate what we saw come January 6th. And this should show that this was not just something that just randomly happened on January 6th. This was a coordinated attack on American soil, and it should be treated just as such.
How come Justice Clarence Thomas is still able to serve on the bench of the Supreme Court?
Because he didn't do anything in this particular case, and as much as I can't stand this guy, and that fact that he looks like us, he didn't do anything wrong, right? In this case, from what we've seen, at least, from what we know and what's come out, it had less to do with him and more to do with his wife. And so even in that case, even if you say pillow talk and he had to know something, there's nothing provable that can show that he did anything out of the ordinary that he shouldn't have done. And in fact, he did not allow for that to move forward when it was brought forth to him, and it was rejected. So, you know, and as much as you kind of have a distaste in your mouth for him and his wife and the actions that take place, you also have to have some kind of proof. We can't just remove people from office or from the bench just because they do something out of distaste.
Just because somebody else brought them into the conversation. No, I was just saying you can't remove them. You can't remove a Supreme Court justice just because somebody else brought their name into the conversation.
Exactly.
Right.
So, you know, it's unfortunate, and you know, I think he's probably, if he didn't, I don't think he had any kind of coordinated thing with his wife. I really think his wife went out on her own to do this, and I'm sure they probably had some heated discussions about her public, because she should have never had a public email that went to Eastman. She should have never had this interview that she did with the Desane, because obviously knowing the position that her husband is in, you know, that reflects family just as well. So she really should have kept her mouth closed in this situation. She didn't, and you know, God bless her. But I think we're going to see more come. The problem's going to be, though, if Republicans take control of the House, as we think that they will come next week, that a lot of this investigative stuff will go right along with the Democrats out the door. Right. And so you're not going to see the same level of intensity of investigation from that standpoint. Now, you may have some independent legal investigations being done, but from the congressional standpoint, that'll be null and void.
Do you see this, Hassan, and then Jules, I want to get your take on this. Do you see this, Hassan, as, I mean, there's already conversation that because the Supreme Court is already biased on the conservative side, and it could be biased on the liberal side, but because there's so much bias that people are going to have less trust in their judgments, in their decisions. They're going to have less trust in the institution. And now with stuff like this coming up and coming out to the light, that it just essentially weakens that branch of our government, of the judicial system. I mean, is that a great concern that you think and that other folks are having right now as we look at this situation with January 6th, his involvement, his wife's involvement unfolds?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, you know, I think the erosion of trust in the governmental system as a whole has reached, you know, uh, epidemic proportions, to be quite honest. I mean, I think a lot of people have just grown tired, and that's why you really see a level of non-engagement when it comes to the political process, and why you need a president to get on national television and talk and try to urge people to vote. It's not because they're ignorant to the fact. It's like, why? Like, when I do come out and vote, nothing changes. You know, you talk this good game in 2020. Y'all promised to get voting rights across the board. Never happened, right? And you promised this, and you promised that, and it never gets done. So why should I be involved in this process? And it's the same way with the courts. Now, I will say the courts have always had, it's like waves, right? We've seen back in the day where under Justice Brooks and others, that it was a very conservative court, and people were, especially those that look like us, had absolutely no win in those courts. And then you get a more conservative court during what you would have thought that were mostly appointed by Republican presidents, who ended up giving us some of the most greatest precedents from abortion to interracial marriage to Roe v. Wade. I mean, to Brown versus Board of Education, right? And so then you get another wave of people who say, oh, you know, maybe the courts are understanding this. The problem is they should not be looking at it from a conservative or a liberal stand. It should be based off the law. That is really what they're supposed to do. Unfortunately, it's easy for us to say that. It's really hard to tell an individual to take their own personal politics out of something when you're looking at issues like this.
Absolutely. Jules, what's your take on this? As Justice Clarence Thomas is brought into this conspiracy, as you said, Hassan said, I mean, he didn't do anything wrong. It just seems like there's another blow to the public trust of government institutions.
It's just another blow, but I mean, at the same sense, it's like it'll be looked past. Here, it's news today, gone tomorrow. I mean, that's just how the news cycles work with information and politics and just things in general. People's opinion already formulated based off headlines. People won't even read the whole entire story anymore. So the headline alone could say one thing, and then the story will completely differentiate what the headline will say. But because based off the headline and the lack of identity or ability to read the rest of the actual story to go behind these topics, how Brother Hassan has broke it down, it's like now the headline is like, oh, I can't trust Clarence Thomas, when he didn't have anything to do with it. It was his wife. But that's the space that we're living in.
Man, I get that, bro. I truly get that. But, you know, it's like somebody says something to my wife, like when you are a unit, when you are married, right? You know, you don't think that a situation is like, oh, that's his wife. He don't think that way. Or that's her husband. She don't think that. You don't think about like that. You know what I mean? You usually say, okay, if they're married, they both must have that same ideology.
Yeah. That's just speaking from different experience. Also, you can be married to somebody who you don't agree with their decision politically, which then I would question, why the hell are you even married to them if y'all have differences of either religion or politics, because that can kind of sort of cause a break in between conversation and views and points on things. I.e., let's just say, for example, she's for abortion, he's against abortion. Like, you know, just minor things like that can change a whole marriage or a dynamic of a relationship. So I do agree with you on that forefront in a sense as well. But also, it's just, to me, and just in general, that's just the way the actual American public is. The idea that I kind of sort of have is, at this point, you know, people are looking for somebody to trust. That's and they, you know, everybody will say, well, you can't trust nobody, you can't trust this, you can't trust politicians, they all lie, this and that. And I gotta kind of push back a little bit, because it's like, you know, right now we're just dealing with candidates that you don't see that are the most relatable to you as far as the higher up positions. Again, that's why I always say focus more on your local elections of what's going on in your actual local areas, your districts, and things like that to pay attention to, because those are issues and things that pertain particularly to you and your surrounding and your urban communities that you come from. So you kind of want to pay attention to the local politics more than the national stage. When it comes to the national stage, my personal opinion, and this is just the Jules P opinion, this is not a culture opinion, this is just the Jules P opinion. You need candidates in these higher positions that can bridge the gap between both the old and the young, because that's the problem. We have too many of the old whites in control in these positions, in these senates, in these congresses, in these presidencies, and it's like they can only speak from a certain level of history and knowledge and what relates to them and what they are bringing. But you need to have candidates in these higher positions who can relate and also relate to both sides, be able to hear, take information from both sides as well, and then be able to formulate opinions. A lot of times it's too late by the time you're trying to address an issue when your age has already surpassed what you're actually known to do from the youthful generation coming up behind you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Brothers, we got a couple of moments left as we look at this whole thing. And Hassan, I want to make sure that you put it out there, Mr. Politics key picks for the key races that we're looking at. And I'm gonna just throw a couple of states out there, Hassan, and you tell me how we should look at it and who you foresee as kind of emerging on top. Let's look at the state of Arizona. Katie Hobbs versus Kari Lake. Hobbs is currently the Secretary of State in what used to be a Republican stronghold. Lake is a Donald Trumper supporter. We also know, of course, like we mentioned earlier before, down in Arizona, a judge had to rule that voter intimidation by Clean Elections USA was unlawful. So what should we expect down in Arizona, bro?
So this is one of those hotly contested toss-up races. Look, Arizona is a swing state without a doubt. Incumbent Governor Doug Ducey is term limited. So the Republican nominee, as you talked about, Kari Lake, relentlessly has pushed this false notion that 2020 election was stolen. And it's actually locked her into a tight race with Katie Hobbs, who's the Democratic Secretary of State, who actually raised the national prominence by defending Arizona's 2020 voting process. Now, the problem with that, though, Farajii, is Arizona has the largest contingency of Republicans who say that they prefer candidates who subscribe to Mr. Trump's big lie, so to speak. And so that's actually helping Ms. Lake, a former local news anchor. You know, again, after Trump got in, anybody can get in office, right? Who has no political whatsoever as other than being a local news anchor there in Arizona. But they are 48-48 in terms of the polls right now. I think that at the end, Secretary Hobbs actually pulls this out. But then don't forget, you also have the incumbent Democratic U.S. Senator Mark Kelly over there in Arizona, the fourth astronaut ever to be elected to Congress. He was just elected in 2020. He's actually up for re-election against Republican Blake Masters. He's a venture capitalist, for those who don't know, a libertarian type of candidate. Libertarian candidate Mark Victor actually bowed out November 1st. He had a few digit lead, a few digits in terms of support in the polls. He backed Masters, made it a closer race than it should be. But even in that, I think Mark Kelly also pulls out that race. But that is one of the races that Republicans and Democrats are targeting for the U.S. Senate seats.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So what other races are you looking at that we should keep our eyes on right now, Hassan?
Well, look, you got 435 House seats all up for re-election across the country. You have another 35 U.S. Senate seats out of the 100 that are up for re-election. Most of them having to be defended by Republicans. And then you got another 36 states for governor seats. Now, Republicans have a little bit more of an edge in the gubernatorial, the governor contest, but quite a few of them will go. You got Pennsylvania. The Republican State Senator Pat Toomey he announced earlier that he wasn't going to run for re-election. This is a battleground state as well. John Fetterman, the current lieutenant governor of the Keystone State, he's going up against your favorite doctor, Dr. Oz. That is actually a toss-up as well. I do think Mr. Fetterman, who just had a stroke and that kind of affected him during the debates, I do think he pulls that out in Pennsylvania. But what Pennsylvania voters appear likely to reject Doug Mastriani. He's a right-wing Republican who's running over there. He's going up against the Democratic Attorney General, Josh Shapiro. And I think that, Shapiro's going to win that hands down. Georgia is a real interesting one. That's what I'm really
right. Everybody looking at Georgia.
Yeah, because we saw what happened 4 years ago with Stacey Abrams and Kemp, and that's a rematch all over again. This time, however, though, Kemp seems to have the edge. Doesn't seem like Stacey Abrams has the same lightning energy that she had 4 years ago.
Dang.
Democrats don't seem to have really kind of taken a hold over there at all. Now, here's the issue, though. Kemp has to get over 50% in Georgia to avoid a runoff. And here's if there is going to be a runoff, which will happen in December, I think that then turns the advantage over to Stacey Abrams, because now the Democrats can focus solely on that race, put a ton of money, a ton of energy into that race, and I think that helps get Stacey Abrams over the top. And then you have Raphael Warnock, the U.S. senator, who was just elected himself in 2020 to that seat. He's up against, of course, your favorite NFL player, Farajii, Herschel Walker, who running around talking about.
As Pastor Jamal said, hey, I saw this. Pastor Jamal Bryan said, we don't need a Walker.
Right. And look, he talking. He really got dogged with this abortion thing, right? You don't believe in abortion, but yet he had a woman make sure multiple abortions that he, of course, denies that ever happened, that he paid for it. And obviously it's coming out. And then Republicans are so weak that instead of kind of just getting off, they actually just poured more money into Walker and really coalesced around him because they need that Senate seat that bad. I think Warnock pulls that out at the end. North Carolina, Senator Burr took out. You got Ted Budd, Congressman Ted Budd. Sherry Beasley, former Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court down there, very qualified candidate, great person, but I don't think she's going to be able to pull out. North Carolina hasn't elected a Democrat in over a decade down there, so it's going to be hard. And in my second home, Nevada, incumbent Democrat Senator Catherine Cortez Masto she's trying to retain her seat against Adam Laxalot, the state's attorney general. That is a dead heat. And it's going to be interesting to see Joe Lombardo, the Republican sheriff down there, who walks a tight line between the moderate Republicans and the right-wing MAGA Republicans. He's the Republican taking on Governor Steve Sisolak in a contest that just put the state really on the right wing, because Republicans seem to be about to take over the legislature in there. And that's my bigger concern, is the gubernatorial races. Because 2 years ahead of 2024, these governors and these state legislatures that I don't think Democrats really have paid too much attention to, Republicans always zero in on them. When you have Republicans who control the legislature or who control the governor's mansion, who then control the election process ahead of possible Donald Trump running in 2024, you now have the opportunity to change election laws to make it more favorable for Republicans. See, Democrats don't look at things like that. Republicans have zeroed in on things like the courts and how you go through the courts and, appointing these justices and these judges across the country. And they're doing the same thing with the state legislatures and the governor's mansions, because they know they're going to be the ones who can change election law in favor of them, right? Restricting voting rights for minorities, making sure you have ID at the polls. Things like that you're going to start to see across the country with these Republican-held legislatures and governors, right? And so that's going to play well for a Trump or whoever the Republican nominee is running in 2024. That's what I'm more worried about than who controls the House and the Senate.
Real quick, what's your take, Hassan? And folks are checking in and saying you've been well informed. My guy, Real Brooklyn, said well informed, brother. You know the politics of each state, and so I told him I've known you for years. This is what you do, bro. You're thorough. You are thorough with your understanding and knowledge of this thing. But what about this? And we got a few moments left. But what about Mandela Barnes, the lieutenant governor out of Wisconsin? What's the likelihood he'll advance to the Senate?
Well, look, I like him. It's a toss-up right now. The Republican Senator Ron Johnson, he's been in office since 2011, right? He's running for re-election. Mandela Barnes is doing, look, Mandela outraised him by $8 million, right?
Wow.
And the incumbent senator got outraised by the challenger by $8 million. That's huge. He's doing great. Now, I want to say most sites, 538, Cook Political Report, credible polling sites, all think that Johnson is favored, that he'll win re-election. I personally think that Mandela Barnes is going to knock off Johnson come November 8th. We're going to see, but it's still way too close to call. The polls have showed each one of them up 1, up 2, 538 up 2.5 within the margin of error. So that's going to be an election night, if not the next day, before we learn the results of that. But that is another close race as well.
Hey, Hassan, we got like 30 seconds, and I'm glad you brought up that point. You know, one of the things that, and I was going to talk about this later on in the show today, but I'm glad you brought it up. One of the things is that people tend to believe that if you don't get the votes or the results on election night, there's some malfeasance, there's some backdoor dealing, there's some fraud possibly happening as a result of that. Talk to us in like 30 seconds. What it should be the proper expectation that we should have about a lot of these races that are probably going to be too close to call and where votes are being tallied the next day. How should we look at that situation?
Well, don't believe the big lie, right? There's a reason why you're starting to get that. Once votes come in, right, and they're tallied on election day, they're put on flash drives, they're secured, they're put down to the Board of Election warehouses. Those votes are counted. But now with the influx of mail-in voting, especially post-COVID, you have almost all states allow it now. Back before COVID, there was a lot of states, including Maryland, who did not allow that. You had absentee balloting, but you had to have a reason in many states, some states, but it wasn't that big of a deal. Post-COVID, it became a huge deal. So now you have all these hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots. Some states allow you to count them before Election Day. A lot of states don't. You have to wait until Election Day before the election workers can start opening these mail-in ballots. So you're not going to get them that night because they got to open them. It's got to be reviewed by multiple people. Everyone has to be open, scanned in. That takes days, if not weeks. And many times the Board of Elections don't start that counting process for days after the election. So don't think that it's some malfeasance, that anything's happening. It's just the process, especially now that we have a more convenient way of voting in terms of mail-in ballot. I would hope that many states get to a point that you start counting them as they come in so we don't have such a long delay. And many states have done that since the primaries earlier this year, have changed their laws for that, but other states have not.
That's what's up. My man, Hassan, Mr. Politics Giordano. Folks, you can check him out, DMV Daily Media Group. He's always having conversations about politics. Hassan, again, we're going to try to see if we can get you on to our special show, our special coverage on Tuesday. Of course, same time, but we want to have as many political voices and political experts on the panel. So we'll chat with you, but God willing, we'll chat with you next week. If we can't talk to you Tuesday, we'll talk to you on Thursday. And I know you're going to have a lot to say after this very, very historic midterm election. Hassan, thank you so much.
I'll be on your show next week. I'll be on EAA 2 to 4 in election day.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Dr. K.
There it is. There it is right there. There it is. Home. There it is. All right, bro. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. Yes, sir. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's continue the conversation. I want to have a discussion that with journalist for the Griot, Ashley Banks, continue to discuss things with our culture crew member, Jules P., as we talk a little bit more about some of these unfounded claims and how there's a new survey saying that Black folks are really afraid. This is a very real concern that voter intimidation, voter suppression is going to be rampant in this year's midterm election. What are your thoughts? We'll check in with Ashley in a moment, so stay with us. And then later on, I got an update for you about Brittney Griner and so much more. So stay with us. It's all happening in the next chapter of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
We've got to stand up. Republicans are banning abortion rights, tearing down democracy, blocking progress. But when Democrats stand together, we win. Because we voted, Democrats stood up for Black lives, voting to ban police chokeholds, stood up for Black women, putting one on the Supreme Court, stood up for our families, lowering cost of health care and prescriptions and capping insulin, and stood up for millions by slashing student debt. This November, let's stand up together and keep making progress.
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in this afternoon. Always happy to have you. Folks, if you have been enjoying the first hour, we've been having a great conversation talking about the host of political stories from President Biden's speech to Justice Clarence Thomas to what we can, some of the expectations for some of these big key races in this year's midterm election. Make sure y'all check us out on the replay. Let your friends and family know that they can see the show live as we replay it, as we restream it on our network of blackstarnetwork.com, blackstarnetwork.com. And while you're there, make sure you show us support. We want your financial support. We need your financial support, as well as sharing the content, letting people know that this Black-owned media platform is here and we're here to stay. We're having conversations about our stories as we talk about issues that are pertinent to us. So make sure y'all check us out at blackstarnetwork.com. Also, make sure you follow us on all social media platforms at Black Star Network on Twitter and IG, and follow yours truly. Yours truly, that means me, guys. You can follow me at The Real Farajii on IG, Farajii on Twitter, and Farajii Muhammad on Facebook. And we truly, truly appreciate you. And more importantly, let's continue to build this community and movement as we talk about our issues and staying culturally relevant. All right, folks, the next conversation I got for you is the conversation about voter suppression and how there's a new survey that shows that Black folks are actually concerned that voter suppression, voter intimidation is going to be a very, very big problem in this year's national midterm election. Now, this was a story that was told by the Griot, and the Griot put out a survey with the Griot and KFF survey. And we have journalist Ashley Banks that is joining us to talk a little bit about this, as well as Culture Crew member Jules P. Ashley, Jules, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, for sure. Thanks for having me on, Farajii. Absolutely.
All right, Ashley, you wrote this story. This is why I wanted to have you on, because you put this story out saying that this new Griot KFF survey shows that Black voters are concerned with voter suppression tactics. 46% of Black voters told the Griot and KFF that they experience waiting in long lines while trying to cast a vote. 46%. Now, here's my question, Ashley. Tell me, I want you to put this in a proper context, and I want to get Jules on this. Long lines.
Yeah.
Is that a form of voter suppression, or is that a sign that more people are becoming active and getting engaged? How should people look at it?
That's a great question, Farajii. First, I'm going to say it's a sign of voter suppression. I was speaking with Leah Daughtry. She's the leader of Black Women's Leadership Collective. And she was letting me know that these longer lines are simply a voter suppression tactic. Let's look at a state like Maryland, for instance. She said that you'll see longer lines in urban communities like Baltimore versus, we'll say, Columbia, Maryland, where it's predominantly white, and they'll have shorter lines. And she said you'll see this in states all around the nation, and it's basically in place for Black voters to be discouraged, for them to want to get out of line, for them to essentially say, I have work, or I have to go pick up my kids. I have other things to do, as opposed to waiting in line for 8 hours during the day to cast a ballot. And so a lot of people end up just walking away and never voting. And so she also discussed with me that Black voters in general usually lean left and are voting for the Democrats on the ticket. She said in some of these states where voter suppression tactics are implemented, we have these longer lines and Black people leave these lines. That means that it's giving Republican candidates a better chance of winning in the elections. And so it's quite unfortunate that we did see that 46% of the pollsters saying that they have had to wait in long lines. Some people say that they had to wait in line for like 8 hours or so. And as we know, in states like Georgia, it's prohibited from people essentially to have like water or snacks while they're waiting in line. So you can imagine someone who may be diabetic, somebody who may be crippled or disabled or just dealing with some sort of ailment or illness, not being able to wait in line that long without having nourishment, right? Or without having the ability to sit down, to take a break, or to do whatever they have to do throughout the day.
Yeah.
And so it's quite unfortunate. I do want to mention that 71% of the voters also let us know that they do fear that voter suppression is going to take place. It's going to interfere with the midterm elections next week.
So, all right. So a couple of questions. Then, Jules, I want you to join me in this part because I got questions about this. All right. So I get the waiting in line. You quoted Ms. Daughtry, Leah Daughtry, in your piece. You said that when she said, we saw in the 2020 presidential cycle where one man was in line in Georgia for 8 hours. It is unconscionable that anyone should have to spend a workday, 8 hours standing in line to participate in the democratic process. I totally agree. First and foremost, I don't know if I'm going to be honest with you. Big shout out to whoever that man is, whoever that Black man, because I don't know if I would be able, I'm going to be honest with you. I couldn't wait. I've waited in lines before for rides and everything else, but for 8 hours, that man wanted to vote.
Oh,
so
for sure.
Big shout out to him, right? But more importantly, a couple of things come to my mind. One is, I don't understand why jobs don't give you time off. Like you could just take the day or hey, look, you go out and vote. All you got to do is just let us know you voted. Hell, bring back a sticker. And it won't go account against you. I never understood that. In all my years of voting, I just like, well, why do jobs make it seem like you go out and vote today, but you got to come right back, knowing that it takes a long time. So I don't understand that point. Second thing is, what are the hours? What are the hours that people can cast votes? And is this because there aren't any like early voting period for certain counties in Georgia? Or is it just because a lot of people, I'm still have a lot of questions around this because the long voter suppression to me, and I could be way off of this, Ashley, not just that you're talking about lines, but you're also talking about some level of lies, some misinformation being put out there. You're talking about intimidation when you got people standing around looking at you all crazy, wearing a gun, having a gun, all of these things. But I'm thinking there are ways that the state could remedy a lot of these problems. And Jules, what's your take on this, bro?
So you brought up a couple points. So let me unpack a couple. So one, with your idea about, having given the day off, that would be lovely. But in a job like mine, frontline in the hospital, you can't give us all off because then who's going to be in the hospital taking care of the patients? So
I don't know, Jules.
So so like that's what I'm saying.
Maybe bring the voting piece to the hospital, bro.
So that's the point I was about to say. So that's the point I was actually going to make. I said in jobs like that where we're required to be either frontline or whatever, there's big enough spaces in these institutions to set up a voting poll. Because the same way you do it in a school gymnasium is the same way you can do it in an auditorium at a hospital that's not being used, only for speakers and lectures by other doctors traveling around and physicians giving different lectures going on. So that's an idea that's very, very, convenient. Your other issue about early voting. So I learned this lesson so my first time ever able to vote was, ironically, the first year Barack was able to run. I think I waited in line for almost 3 to 4 hours before I even got to the point of getting inside the building. So that's not even talking about inside the building waiting. The line, like the area where I voted at, it had this long street and then it went all the way up to a main road. And we were standing in line on the main road, trying to get down to the side road just to get down into the actual polling place.
You're talking about in 2008.
Yep. So that was my very first time being eligible to vote. Since then, I've also now learned how to utilize my early voting. And like I said, how you said, it's not offered in all these other counties and states. It's also an advantage that I'm having because, you get to see, you get the ballot in the mail. It gives you about 12 different locations. So I remember for the last presidential election, I just did the early voting at Morgan. I said, Morgan is one of the closest colleges to me. I went to Morgan. So I said, all right, let me go shoot to Morgan. And I probably was in line for maybe about 30, 40 minutes. But by the time I got in, it was like quick in and out, choose your selections, and you're rolling. So, early voting is like, if it's offered in your state, if it's offered in your county, take advantage of the early voting. Because again, I do agree with that can turn you away from standing in line for so long and then trying to cast a ballot. It's like, I'm standing in line to vote, bro. Like this, like you said, I got kids to pick up. I got things to do. I got to get back to work. I got doctor's appointments. I'll give you a prime example, Farajii.
Yeah.
I don't even go to the mall on Saturdays because I hate lines. I get that. So it's like, I get the idea of that's another form of voter suppression because if I'm standing there, in my mind, it's like, okay, I kind of sort of know what I want to vote for and what I got going on. And then after about the first 20 minutes, then the second 20 minutes, and an hour goes past, and 2 hours is like, yo, is this even really worth it? Like, what's going on here? Like, we're talking to somebody. It all takes is somebody in the line to be like, man, this is BS. I'm getting out of here. Like, yo, I'm rolling with you. This is dumb too. I'm not standing in line for this. It's like,
well, see, see, that's the concern that I have, Jules. Especially with younger and newer voters, right? Younger, newer voters don't understand, I think, Ashley and Jules, like you're going to have to wait. Look, man, there's a meme that's been circulating. I don't know if either one of you saw this, but there's a meme that's circulating about Black folks that say, we stand in line for 3 minutes and we already complaining. You know what I'm saying?
True. We're mostly impatient.
You know what I'm saying? Like, we stand in line for 3 minutes for food, for something we want. And we be like, oh my gosh, is somebody going to help? I get it. But at the end of the day, there are so many other ways that we can remedy that. Take a look. Jayla checked in, one of our culture crew members, online culture crew members. She said, Jayla said, look, that's why they have early voting also on Saturday and some states on Sundays too. They can do it on their days off. There's no excuse for not voting. I'm saying this not to throw shade or diminish anyone, but I would think that a lot of these like early voting periods, all of these little things that you can do to make sure you get your vote in should be taken advantage of, Ashley. And I'm not sure I'm not sure. I don't want to be on, the side of like, well, why didn't you vote? Because the line was too long. And it's like, well, what time did you go in there? I went in there on Tuesday at 12 o'clock noon where people had their lunch period. And it's like, what were you expecting?
Yeah, but Farajii, when it comes to early voting, and even if in some areas early voting is taking place on the weekend, let's think about the people who don't live close to these polling sites, right?
Okay.
Who don't have the transportation, who don't have people that they can lean on to get to these places, right? May not even have the funds to catch an Uber or to catch a bus or to catch whatever to get there. So yes, there are people who don't have an excuse when it comes to voting, but there are a lot of people who are suffering and don't have the means to get there. And those people are overlooked. Those people are ignored. And I do think that it's a little unfair to think that we are all created equally. We know we're not, especially as minorities and Black people in this country. We just have to think about those people who may not have the same means that you may have, that I may have, right? Or
That's
Jules
true.
may have.
That's true.
And so, yeah, so there are people who just don't have it. And they only have that day, right? Election day, to be able to do it. And then on Saturday and Sunday, people do work on Saturday and Sunday. Not everybody has, you know, a job Monday through Friday, the luxury of having a job Monday through Friday, working a 9 to 5, getting paid really well. Some people have to work those grunt shifts on Saturday and Sunday just to make ends meet. And so it's only lucrative for them to maybe take off on election day. And they're the ones that have to stand in that long line, hoping that they can cast their ballot that day.
No, I think you're totally excellent. I think you're excellent, you know, absolutely right on that. And I certainly don't want to give off the impression that I'm just saying, oh man, they're you know, these things don't exist. I know these things exist, but you know, and I've been saying this throughout this week. Have a vote plan. You know, try to figure out the best times that you're going to cast your ballot when you plan to make your move, or if you can get a ride there. Make sure you check what the rules and guidelines are, and all of those things. Like, have a vote plan. Now, here's another thing that you mentioned in your piece, Ashley. You're talking about, and I think this is the part you mentioned. When you look at Black people being involved or wanting to see representation, you said this according to the survey that you found when Black voters were asked to think about the current climate of the political system and Black representation in U.S. politics, 88% said they saw a problem with gerrymandering or redrawing election districts to favor one political party. 83% of Black voters took issue with limiting early voting and vote by mail. Additionally, 75% of Black voters were concerned with laws that require voters to show government-issued photo ID. Let's break this down very quickly. 88% they saw a problem with gerrymandering or redrawing election districts to favor one political party. I'm thinking states like Texas, Georgia, some of the southern states, this is the real big problem. Is that correct?
Yeah. Oh, that's correct. And as we know, these the gerrymandering and the redistricting is honestly just in favor for Republican candidates. It's to make sure that we're squeezing out that Democratic vote so that these Republicans can win. I mean, that's no secret, right? That this is totally biased towards the Republican Party, and we all see it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit also about the fact that 83% of Black voters took issue with limiting early voting and vote by mail. What's that about?
Yeah. And so as we were just talking about early voting, some places the windows are much shorter, right? You don't have all day or like all week to show up and participate in early voting, also limiting the ability of Black people and minorities to get to these early voting sites. But this is once again tactics at the hands of conservatives and Republicans to make sure that Democrats are not casting their ballots.
And then 75% of Black voters are concerned with laws that require voters to show government-issued photo ID. That's a problem for some Black voters?
It is. And so there are some people, let's say you lose your ID, you may not have a license. As we know, especially here in Maryland, right, getting a real ID can be very difficult. Most of us living in the state had to do it. I did it, I believe, at the top of the pandemic. And you have to just show so much proof of where you live and all this jazz just to get this new license. And so say people have had a hard time doing that, it can be difficult to prove who you are just to vote. And in a sense, this is another way of limiting some individuals from having the ability to exercise their right to cast a ballot. And so some people, for instance, also Your registration card has to match everything that's on your license. And let's say you haven't updated your license, and that can be a discrepancy.
Yeah.
I know for me, the address that's on my license is a very old address.
I'm about to say that's a lot of people, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm supposed to like carry around this piece of paper in addition, talking about where I actually live. And honestly, I don't always have that on me. And so, but for a lot of people, that can pose issues, especially if you're in a state like Texas and you're Black and they're not interested in your Democratic vote. Let's say the people who are operating the polls are a little biased. You could have issues with trying to move forward in the polling site. And so that's a huge concern for the Black voters that engaged in this survey.
Jules, when you hear about these concerns, you know, and I mean, as a young brother, young voter, you know, I'm hearing, I'm wondering, well, how does this play out for the new voter, for the young voter nowadays?
So it's more incumbent on us to pass that information on to the young voters like myself and then the generation after and under me, because it's kind of sort of like this, you know, when you get stopped by a police officer, you know, the generation before me told you the type of things to look out for and to be aware of when, you know, a cop pulls you over, what to do and how to act and how to maintain and how to control yourself. So it's the same thing we have to do with voting. We have to pass down to the next generation, because a lot of things that they don't want us to know, they're not going to tell us. So we have to spread that message on to our own and pass that information down. Prime example, she stated about having the ID. My ID has my old address on there. So I got to carry that stupid card. And of course, if it rains, then the car gets wet, then the card is disposable, can't find it, can't read it because the ink don't smear. So it's just so many different tactics and ways that they try to, you know, put things in your place. But you got to also already have that information to have backup to say, nah, I got this. This is what I'm going to roll with. This is my ID. This is my validation of where I live at. And blah, like that, to continue to say, oh, I'm going to complete this process to the fullest extent, because there are going to be roadblocks. I mean, like I said, not just lines. Ashley even stated, you know, when you go to early voting, that is true. The time frame for early voting is a lot shorter. Like, you know, when you go on election day, it's all day. You can probably go from like 7 a.m. to like 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Yeah.
So early voting is probably like a 9 to 5. So it's like
Absolutely.
You really have to fit your time into identifying if this is what you're really going to do, if voting is what you're really controlled about. You really have to plan it like a vacation. You have to plan ahead, check your days off, check time frames, make sure doctor's appointments and dentist appointments and things of that nature don't affect in the time frames that you're free and able to do this process, and then go complete the mission. Because that's the overall goal about it. A lot of people do a lot of talking, but completing the mission is the biggest part. So you casting your ballot, you stating your claim of this is who I voted for, and that is my issues and things that I'm focused on talking about. That's finishing the mission, and that's what the goal is at the end of the day.
And you know what, to that point, Jules, I mean, when you're talking about finishing the mission, that's why it's important for you to plan the situation out as best as you can. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to have an ironclad plan that's not going to be disrupted. But I'm just saying, like for example, when you talk, Jules, about voting in 2008 for President Obama, hell, even 2012, I mean, I already knew. I remember standing in line in Baltimore. I already knew it's going to be ours. First Black president, please. You know what I mean? My point is that you got to look at it's not just what's happening on the day of, but what led up to the day of. You got to understand like all the dynamics. I suspect that, Ashley, that this year's midterm, we probably going to see the highest turnout in U.S. history. I'm going to just throw that out there. Just because of the current climate of politics that we find ourselves in this country.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And it seems like everybody's so plugged in. It doesn't matter how old you are. Everyone is plugged into what's happening. And we have so many races across the nation that will be historical if these Black candidates win. And so, like you said, we could have probably one of the highest turnouts we've seen in recent years. And once again, Republicans know that. And that's why after 2020, and we saw that high turnout of Democratic voters, they made sure to implement legislation to prevent people that look like you and I and Jules to not cast votes, to not be able to cast ballots in favor of those candidates that we would like to see put in place, and those candidates that we believe would better represent us. So it's going to be interesting to see what actually takes place on Tuesday. But Farajii, you could be right.
Absolutely. All right, let's go take some comments real quick from our online culture crew. Willie, my guy, you said because a voter holiday would encourage more people to vote, those people would vote to take a hammer to these corporate interest. Facts. I'm with it. I feel you. But we need to have a voter holiday. And I love how you said, Willie, Tuesday should be, you shouldn't be any consequence. If you have the type of job, and I'm not saying, to your point, Jules, everybody can't take off, right? But it should be. Maybe it should be a national, quote unquote, a national holiday. Just as much as we close certain businesses and everything. Hell, we don't close Walmart or Target or any of these stores on Christmas. You know what I'm saying? On certain days, on those sacred days. So Tuesday, I think voting should be a national holiday.
I agree, Farajii. I mean, especially that Columbus Day is still a holiday and it shouldn't be.
Right.
Ashley. Joe.
Facts.
What do we really do on Columbus Day?
Go to work.
We don't celebrate that.
We already named it Indigenous People Day. November is actually, this month alone is Native American History, and then History Month, and I think we have Native American Heritage Day during the month of November. So what do we do on Columbus Day? But we can't have a national voting holiday?
Come on. One of the most important days in the year.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Okay. Let me go here. Let me go to Real Brooklyn. If they can throw a wrench in the voting mechanism, then it will more than likely go in favor of the majority, which is what they want. Right. So we're essentially saying, and this is, I know I got a couple of new watchers today, and folks are like, oh, you guys are just Democrat. Oh, not really. It's just looking at Republicans. When you look at the history of the efforts of the Republicans and how they have done things like voter suppression, it really comes from the Republican stuff. Republican lawmakers in a lot of these states that are Republican led, there's a problem with voter suppression. I mean, that's just what it is. That's just what it is. But here's the thing, though, Ashley and Jules, this is what I found to be interesting. That as much as we move at these states are Republican led, they have voter suppression. These are also the states with the highest concentration of Black people. When they were talking about during the pandemic, how there was a number of folks, particularly Black folks, that have moved from urban cities to less urban cities, to rural and to suburban areas, right? And people who are said, they wanted to change their lifestyle because of the pandemic. The top places that they moved to were Florida, Texas, Georgia. These are the states with the highest concentration of Black folk. And I always thought to myself, why? I don't necessarily understand. Like, these are the places whose policies are not always in the best interest. I get it. You can find probably decent amount of land. You can probably find decent prices for homes and for cost of living. But at the end of the day, these are still Republican-led states that some of them have some draconian Republican policies still in the books today. I don't know, Ashley, if you can speak to it, but I just find that to be interesting.
No, I think that's interesting. But you're right. I know a lot of people myself who are my age and have moved down south, especially to Texas. I joke all the time. I say I would move to Texas if it weren't for the politics. But yeah, the cost of living is better than what we have dealing here in the DMV and where you are for sure. But at the same time, absolutely not. I do not completely understand why some people are moving to Republican-led states, and maybe they don't know the impact that it's having on them, but we do, and so Absolutely. I think we know better. But that's very interesting. But even more so, that just goes to the point of why Republicans are the ones, making these laws, passing legislation to ensure that voter suppression is taking place and making sure that Black and brown people are voting or not being able to vote in favor of their Democratic candidates, or third-party candidates.
Yep. Tristan, you checked in. Tristan Sheese, you said, I'm white. I had to jump through hoops with paperwork to get ID. A lot of white workers stuck in jobs where they can't get time off to go vote too. That's interesting.
Where's she based?
We often hear about black folks and their trials of trying to get that time off, but to hear a white person saying, "Hey, I'm having the same problems too getting ID." Did that come up in any part of the survey, as far as you know, Ashley?
So we interviewed Black Americans. This was simply for Black Americans. But I would be interested to see what where your viewer is based, where they live, because I think that would make a difference as well.
Yeah, Tristan, I would love to know where you live. Please definitely check back in, and thank you so much for the comment. Trina, you said we stand in line for Nike, movies, and a whole host of other things. Somebody else also added Beyonce tickets. We could do...
Ticketmaster's on your apps. Who stands in line for tickets?
Right.
Okay, y'all. All right, cool. Okay. But Trina said we could do the same for our rights. If we stand in line for Nike, movies, and a whole host of other things, we can do the same for our rights. Ashley, Jules, y'all want to respond to that?
Jules don't stand in line for nothing. Nike, movies, nothing. Jules don't do lines. I go to the grocery store at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. Jules don't do lines.
I am like Jules. Like Jules said earlier, he doesn't even go to the mall on Saturday. Neither do I. I go to the mall on a weekday, and I go right when it opens, and I'm out of there within 30 minutes to an hour.
Exactly.
I do not stand in line for anything. Voting, sure. Everything else, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
All right, I could tell y'all next generation. I could tell y'all y'all are next generation. Y'all new. Okay, cool. Nobody stands in lines like Farajii do. All right, TG Jicky Vex. You say we should register Republican and vote Democratic. We have to beat them at their hateful games. That's interesting. Register Republican, vote Democratic.
That's an interesting thought.
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know. Like, I get it. I get it. I think I get the sentiment, but I don't know.
No. You know what? I gotta say no.
You know what? Personally, it just I don't know.
Project. I gotta say no. I can't go to Pittsburgh Steelers games as a Ravens fan. I gotta stay as my Ravens. So no. I gotta say no, Farajii. I gotta say no.
As DJ Khaled says, that just the thought of you affiliating with certain group, it breaks your heart.
It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. I'll be Ravens.
All right, I got you. And Jawan, my sister, you said my husband is mobility impaired, so it's easier for me to just send both our ballots by mail. Here's the thing about the mail ballots, and Jawan, you're right. You're absolutely right. And here's the other part of this conversation around voter intimidation. The New York Times did this piece where they looked at the top 5 unfounded claims around voting. I want to share this very quickly with folks. Take a look at this, folks. And Ariel and Keenan, let's put this on the screen, please. What they found to be the top 5 reasons why that is circulating on social media right now around this issue of voting. Take a look. The number one, here they are. 1, voting machines are rigged. That's unfounded. That's not true, except in the state of Texas, they're having an issue right now. Well, they're not an issue. They're just putting it out, a warning that the new machines are sensitive to the touch. They're like touchscreen. Okay. So you have to be very, very intentional about how you're touching the screen to cast your vote. So to all of my Texas watchers, definitely, the Texas Tribune put this out just like a couple of hours earlier today. So it's sensitive to the touch. So the voting machines are rigged. This is an unfounded claim that ballot fraud is rampant. And I want to, let's take this down so I can get this reaction from Ashley and Jules. So ballot fraud is rampant. Dead people and illegal immigrants are being exploited. Voting by mail is untrustworthy, and then delays in counting votes are irregularities. Ashley, when you see these things, right, and this, I think, and I wanted to bring this as part of this conversation, but I see so many people say things like this, like, oh man, they really, when you mail in your ballot, it just goes into a paper bag, it goes in, and it's never counted. But there are a lot of people who do believe this stuff.
Mm-hmm. And there are. And And I mean, that goes back to 2020, right? When we saw Trump lose the race, and essentially he was citing voter fraud. And that's when all of his minions decided they were going to say the same thing. Sure, I would say there are probably errors and different aspects of voting because that's just how it goes, right? I'm sure somebody's voting when they're voting by mail. Sure, something could possibly get lost, but is it rampant? Probably not. And the fact that there is no evidence to support that it's rampant and that there is an issue of voter fraud, I think people need to just leave it alone. Unless you can present evidence, don't say it.
Absolutely. Jules, what's your take on these unfounded claims? Ballot fraud is rampant. Dead people and legal immigrants are being exploited. Voting by mail is untrustworthy. Delays in counting votes are irregularities. Voting machines are rigged.
Farajii, repeat what you said when you first read them about Texas and their sensitive machines. Can you repeat that, please, so I can see the reaction?
In the state of Texas right now, they're basically saying that you it's a push screen, so you have to be very intentional, or you might make the wrong choice. It's because of the technology, not because necessarily the machine is trying to change your vote.
So we're giving disclaimers before we vote.
Both of y'all got this look on y'all face right there. Like Ashley got this look
shady. Very shady.
Yeah.
That part.
Like the Texas voting machine ain't voting, right?
Yeah. that's like when you said it, I'm like, so they're already telling you in advance that you can by mistake select the wrong vote. So be very careful because the machine is sensitive.
Real talk. Look, so this is coming from the Texas Tribune. They said if you don't hit it, hey, look, let me just share with this Keenan and Ariel. I know we got this for the next segment, but put screen for one dealing with this segment because look at it. This is the warning. Double check early voting ballots began spreading across social media this week as some Texas voters claimed that electronic voting machines had switched their votes from Democratic to Republican. But this isn't a case of grand conspiracy, malfeasance, or rigged machines. Instead, election officials, security experts, and voting rights advocates say some of the touch-sensitive screens on voting machines can be tricky to use, much like miscues while trying to use a smartphone. Midland County Election Administrator Carolyn Graves likened the experience to texting with a small keypad. If you don't hit it just exactly right, you're going to hit one of the letters around it. It's essentially the same thing. If you don't hit it with the tip of your finger or turn your finger to the side, then you could hit the other choice.
Farajii, my question is, if they know that this is an issue, why haven't they switched out these machines? Why are we still using them?
Hey, I got another one. I got another one that hits Ashley's point from a conversation earlier. So if I do my math correctly, there's 50 states, correct?
Yeah.
So what state are we talking about again?
Texas.
Okay, never mind. All right, next topic.
Enough said, Jules.
Next topic.
Hey, Ashley, I don't know what to say. Like, I wanted to put the report out there. I was like, you know what? Our people need to hear this because a lot of our people in Texas, right? Roland is from Texas, right? And I'm sure he gonna talk about look, this is serious. This is very serious. But I don't want nobody to go into the booth and they be like, well, why the machine? And they start, you know what I mean? And it's like, hey, man, your finger has to be
like Edward Scissorhands.
Right. But I don't know what to make of it, Ashley.
Voting should not be like texting. Like, what is this? That makes no sense to me. Like, that is such a silly quote. Absolutely not. Remove the machines. I shouldn't have to go in there thinking about how I'm going to vote. Like, I got to make sure my finger is so precise on this machine. Like, what is happening? It's 2022. What are we doing?
Look. One of the online culture crew members said, you need a stylist. Just bring a stylist, man. No, seriously.
Basically.
No, seriously. Just bring one of them stylists for your phone, right? And just start. And they'd be like, well, what are you doing to the machine? Oh, I read the report. I'm voting. Can you please back away?
I'm voting.
I can't. How sad. Texas is going out bad. Like, just stop.
Come on, man. Like, just
Isn't that Governor Abbott down there? Like, when is his time to go? You know what? Because it starts with him. All that stuff starts with him. But then you got to look at the the secretary or the county administrator for all of those different counties in Texas. That's a real problem. So if there is some issue with this year's midterm election results in Texas, it's not trying to change it. Just your fingers are too damn fat.
Oh gosh.
Tell your fingers to lose the weight. And now we're finger
Tell your fingers to just don't eat it for a couple of days before y'all go to vote, because you want to make sure that it's just the right size.
Despicable.
Absolutely. All right, Ashley, we appreciate you. I thank you so much for your report. We got to bring you back on much, much more. But I appreciate you for bringing this out. And I think it at least will talk to us about the importance of understanding the dynamics. And where are you going to be on Tuesday night? How are you moving?
So I'll be here with April. We're going to be in DC. Mark Lamont and April Ryan are going to be hosting a show on the Griot covering the elections. I believe it's from 7 to 9. And so we'll be here, but definitely want to come back on your show. Got a lot to talk about. A lot is happening in DC, as you know. So thanks for having me, Farajii, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Absolutely. Ashley Banks, journalist, aspiring future lawyer / attorney, doing her thing, representing Baltimore, out in DC and around the world. And she's in the White House too. Y'all don't know, Ashley is up in the White House, in the White House press corps. So big shout out to her. But Ashley, thank you. Yeah.
I just want to say the dopest people come from the DMV, but that's just bias.
That's what it is.
No, I agree. That's
facts. That's facts. All right, Ashley, appreciate you.
Of course. Bye, guys.
Bye. See you. Folks, we got to take a quick pause when we come forward. I got to share with you some latest updates around Brittney Griner. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
An angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are black beyond measure.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland@RolandSMartin.com.
We've got to stand up. Republicans are banning abortion rights, tearing down democracy, blocking progress. But when Democrats stand together, we win. Because we voted, Democrats stood up for Black lives, voting to ban police chokeholds, stood up for Black women, putting one on the Supreme Court, stood up for our families, lowering cost of health care and prescriptions and capping insulin, and stood up for millions by slashing student debt. This November, let's stand up together and keep making progress.
All right, folks, for our final conversation today, we want to talk about Brittney Griner. So I want to bring in my brother, Culture Crew member Jules P. Yeah, Jules. First, let me just share with you very quickly, because, you know, the last segment we talked about the Texas situation. And this is, I mean, I hope that we didn't, like, make it light, bro, so light that people don't understand the seriousness of it. Like, this is actually happening. This is not like a metaverse type of situation. This is real. So one of our Culture Crew members, Angela, checked in. Angela Caleb, and I appreciate you, Angela, for sharing your story. You said, my son, who's 26, and I voted earlier this week in Texas, and that's true. I pushed the button for Beto O'Rourke, and it hit Greg Abbott. Oh, I got a worker's attention, and they informed me I had to hit dead on it. Yo.
Okay.
Texas. So you hit Beto O'Rourke, who's running for governor of Texas, and you get Greg Abbott on the screen. Y'all. Crew. Do we need to sound the alarm on something like this? Jules, do we need to? I mean, Texas is one of those states, bro, that if we able to get a big piece of Texas, and I'm saying we in terms of turning the conversation, turning the page on some of its policies, right? You got to get a state like Texas.
Yep.
Big state.
Yeah, I get. So, like, I think just it's definitely all voters in Texas. I'm talking all voters in Texas. Just make sure you double and triple check. We can't, help out. I'm not in Texas. I can't help out with the machines. I ain't a repairman, but just make sure when you're casting your vote, you double and triple check. And that's it. Like, I mean, still go out there. Don't let nothing be a deterrent. Do not let anything be a deterrent from you voting. Just make sure you double and triple check before you cast in that ballot.
I'm telling you, just look up at the screen. Make sure that the screen matches your choices that you want to make. Now, again, this is what they've put out there. Jules, you said it. They told us at the beginning, this is going to happen. Ashley said, well, why do we keep using those machines? I don't know. Right. Great question. Especially don't have an answer for it.
Right. You know about this before we even got to this point.
Like, if you knew that the machine was that sensitive, why are you using it en masse? You got all these people in the state of Texas, and you using these type of touchscreen machines where just the wrong press of your fingertip can lead to a different choice that you may not want it to make.
And this is no slight to the people. It's like, again, I hate that the people have to suffer with this nonsense. It's literally just about the actual polling equipment that they provided for y'all. I feel sorry for. There's no slight at the actual citizens of Texas. I just feel sorry for the equipment given to you.
Absolutely. Sophia, you checked in and said we get a printout. Yeah, well, if you get a printout of your vote, then check that. You just got, and guess what? This is how it's going to play out. This is part of the voter suppression conversation. If you have to double and triple check your choices on the screen, that's going to take more time for you to be at that station, that voting station. And then the domino effect starts to happen. Then you're going to have more time to wait in line. You know what I'm saying? And then that's going to lead to more people possibly saying, yo, I can do this later, or I don't need to do this now. You know what I mean? Walking out of line. Like, just one small thing. And I mean, it's not small, but I'm just saying, like, it adds to the conversation. I'm telling you, I'm going to keep my eyes out on this. I'm going to keep my eyes out on this because, Jules, a lot of our people in Texas, I told you, a lot of black folks in Texas. I think Texas, if I'm not mistaken, has the highest population of black folks in this country. If I'm not mistaken, I think Texas is that place. More than California, Florida, Georgia. Texas may be that place. Man. So we'll hopefully it doesn't become a problem, but I would hate that it would be. Tiana checked in and said, "This is your duty to vote. If you have children, their future depends upon it." Absolutely. Absolutely.
Take them with you. That's always, I said that from jump. And I mean, again, we're excluding, infants and toddlers, but like, if you have children, take them with you so they can see it. So then next year, so they can see it. Then take them again in the next 4 years, like every 2 years. I mean, for midterms, take them with you so they can see this process and know how important it is. They're not going to understand at a young age, but the more and more, it's like a child's mind. The more and more you see things, and you again adapt to that habit. So take them with you.
Absolutely. Right. There it is. All right. So we're going to keep our eyes out on this Texas voting machine situation. But I did want to update the people in the final few minutes of today's show. I did want to update the people, Jules, about what's going on with Brittney Griner. We've been following this story for a minute, and apparently she has moved forward in the sense of meeting with members of the U.S. officials. So take a look at this. She's in prison, but she meets with U.S. embassy officials. And so we're probably going to be talking more about this tomorrow as more details of this situation becomes available. But there is some talk. She gets a visit from these embassy officials, and I'm pulling it up here. And the members of the U.S. embassy that she met with say that she had been in relatively good spirits considering the situation. They saw her firsthand, Jules, her tenacity and perseverance despite her present circumstances. This is what the U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Pete said about the situation. And, we know that there might be some stuff happening behind the scenes, bro. This sounds like it's a good step. Now, we're going to keep our eyes open on it, but this sounds like this might be a good step. What you thinking about this? How you looking at this? Are you kind of like cautiously optimistic or what?
Yeah. I want to see the actual what comes from this. That's just it. Like I appreciate any step taken, to try to right this situation, but I'll be more so. I think my conscience will feel a lot better for her situation once I hear in detail of a possible return and like guarantee, like details, like just give me more details of actual bringing her home. And then, but this is a big step. I mean, again, I love any type of movement that can make something happen, but I don't like to get excited about pre-things. I want to see the actual her come home.
Yeah, I'm with you. They're saying that the U.S. Department is saying that they're pressing for it to happen, and hopefully this will lead to something. I mean, there might be a situation where you might see, because this is international politics, so we might see this, over the next couple of months. But I know for her, I can only imagine getting a visit from U.S. embassy officials will lift her spirits, Jules, because she, you know, her wife has already said that she felt like she was forgotten. And now when you get a visit like this, hopefully it was like a sign and indicator that, look, we trying, we're going to find a way to bring you home as soon as we can. So I know it's not going to happen before the midterm. It's not going to happen. It may be in the next month, maybe by the time, you know, maybe we'll see here some good news before the end of the year. But I'm cautiously optimistic. So I just want to let everybody know where we are with that situation. Jules, my guy, I appreciate you so much, bro. I thank you so much for your time today, spending it with us. Where you going to be on Tuesday night, Jules? On Tuesday?
I'll be at work for sure, but then my polling place is maybe about, I think, 10 minutes away from me. So I'll just shoot an Uber straight from my job to go vote in the evening. There it is. So, you know, if you definitely, you know, we will check back in with you next week. By the time we check back in, we might be getting some end results from all of those close races. But I expect this is going to be a major situation. I feel the energy now. I don't know, you know, there's some buzz here in LA around, of course, we got our big mayor's race with Rick Caruso and Karen Bass, Congresswoman Karen Bass. And so this whole situation, bro, is just crazy. Back there in Maryland, Wes Moore is expected to pull out a win, to make an historic victory of being the first Black person to serve as governor of the great state of Maryland. I'm looking forward to that. So we got a lot to talk about. We definitely got a lot to talk about. But Jules, thank you so much for your expertise and intelligence. And thank you for being so good for the culture, brother. For sure. And I know I ain't been on here when it happened, but, you know, rest in peace to take off, man. That was a crazy
situation. Bro.
That was crazy.
Hey, look, we still having conversations about it, bro.
Yeah, that was
we still having conversations. That really struck me.
Yeah.
I didn't think it would, but it struck me. I was like, damn. That really struck me, man. So yeah, definitely. We'll see how things go, and more importantly, you know, what comes out of that, because there was that hashtag, we talked about it here on the show, Black men deserve to grow old. But more importantly, you know, my hope is that his death will lead to somebody's life being saved, somebody else's life being saved, and we will know if that happens, then he didn't die in vain. Right. He died a horrible death, but his legacy won't be in vain. So you're absolutely right. Jules, thank you so much, bro. For sure. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. I thank each and every one of you for being a part of the conversation. I thank Ashley Banks. I thank Hassan Giordano. Make sure y'all follow them on all social media platforms. Ashley, ASHLEE Banks. Hassan, you can find him on social media. Make sure you continue to have the conversations about all that we've been talking about, folks. You know, we're in the final few days of this situation. Let me share this with you very quickly, that of course here on Black Star Network, as we are edging closer and closer to the national midterms, make sure y'all tune into blackstarnetwork.com for us for around the clock election coverage. We're going to be having coverage all day on Tuesday. Of course, on Tuesday, we're going to be talking about things happening, getting some updates. And of course, on Roland's show, Brother Roland, RMU, we're going to have conversations, and then a whole lot more. So there's going to be some very, very thorough election coverage happening here on Black Star Network, hosted by Brother Roland Martin, and including a number of dope voices. Yours truly will be a part of that, and others will be a part of that. So definitely tune in for those conversations on election night for the national midterm elections. All right, folks, that's going to do it for me. Big shout out to my team, King Keenan, Ariel, Joel, my control room. Thank you for doing the great work that you continue to do. And big shout out to all of you, my online culture crew, all of our new watchers. Look, folks, if you are a new watcher, welcome to the culture. Welcome to the culture crew. Welcome to the conversation. If you are a new watcher, if there's things that we haven't talked about this week and you want to join us in the conversation, folks, and trust and believe, we want to bring you on. So if you have some news ideas and you feel like you have the voice to bring these conversations to life, email me at Farajii@blackstarnetwork.com, Farajii@blackstarnetwork.com. Follow me on my social media at The Real Farajii on IG and Farajii on Twitter. Send me a message. Let me know, Farajii, I'm interested in coming on the show to share my thoughts on this topic. Let me know what the topic is, and then we'll work to bring you on, your voice on, to make sure that you're heard loud, clear, and that you're seen and your presence is felt. So make sure y'all email me at farajii@blackstarnetwork.com. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow. We're going to be checking in with Culture Crew members, Nir Muhammad. We got my man Rashad, and a whole lot more. So make sure y'all stay tuned. We got a lot of great stuff coming up. Stay tuned. 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Roland Martin Unfiltered is coming right at you. So stay tuned for that discussion. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Peace.